You must strive to find your own voice, because the longer you wait to begin, the less likely you are to find it at all.
Hi, my name is Manav. I am the CEO and co founder of a company called Nevermind. We're a multidisciplinary creative studio, and we basically help brands, musicians, artists across their branding, web design, film, pitch decks, and quite a few things from a pure principle of, I mean, principle of branding. Um, and this is how I built a creative studio with no funding, no network, and no plan. Now, this entire episode is going to be broken down into 10 short sections that breaks down who I was, the kind of experiences I had, and the person I've become right now, and where I want to be over the next few years. Section 1, the box. Um, this mostly talks about the person I used to be 2 years ago. I was 23 years old. I just graduated in AI from a university in Dubai, and I just started working. Now, at this point, I had worked 3 jobs in data. I had a couple research papers that I had finished, and one was published. And I had just started working at the Dubai Police, and it had a stable salary and a relatively clear career path. It was a job that my parents and people in my friends and family circle would brag about, but it wasn't something that I enjoyed as a person. Basically, every single day felt the same, and I wasn't sure how to deal with something like this. I am somebody as a person that requires novelty on a day-to-day basis, and it wasn't tapping into the creative side that I had built for the last few years before this job. You see, alongside engineering, ever since I moved to Dubai, which was in 2018, I had started I started building my own bands. I started building my own metal bands. I was a musician. Um, at that point, when you're actually building a project like a band, you're thrown in the deep end. You've got to learn how to design artworks for your band on your own. You've got to learn how to film, make music on your own. It's not a project that is easy to work on because, one, you don't have the kind of money that you need to get that sort of um, creative delivery required to complement your music. And what it did for me was throw me in the deep end to a point where I would wake up one day, work in music, write lyrics, and the next day I would design artworks, and the day after that I'd figure out what a social media feed is, and the day after that I was thrown in the deep end about how to shoot a music video, and then how to edit a music video. And day after day, the more I actually threw myself into creative spaces, I started realizing that I enjoyed that a lot more. Um, on the AI side of things, I think something that I truly, truly enjoy and enjoy still is coding. I loved making something using code. Um, at that point, when I was working and every day felt the same, it truly felt like I was wasting the kind of potential I had in a room like that. I mean, I was sitting in a box doing one thing over and over. And on most days, even that thing wasn't being used to its full potential. There were issues. There were issues in the entire infrastructure and in the entire system that I was in. As somebody that had just started working in that organization, I couldn't do more because there were other people doing those roles. I wasn't allowed an insane opinion. Maybe because I was a novice, maybe because I was somebody that had just started learning, but also maybe because this is how it's going to be. You, as somebody who is working a stable 9 to 5 job, don't have a say compared to somebody that's been there relatively longer, especially in an organization that big. And it just wasn't for me. I mean, I could see the next 5 years very clearly if I stuck down that road, and that terrified me more than uncertainty. And I had no idea how I would deal with it. I started feeling like stability isn't safety anymore, and it was killing my growth. I was basically renting, my time out for money. And it was, it started to feel like a very, very dangerous move for me to go down that route, because the kind of life I was looking at was basically a life of one, 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 one for months together. And then maybe, if I'm lucky, I'm going to jump from one to two, which is basically an increment in my salary. And I'm not somebody with that amount of patience. Neither am I with with that amount of my risk appetite is way higher than that. For me, the way I look at it is that the most dangerous move you can do with your career isn't really quitting. It's a place that makes you feel like it's staying in a place that makes you feel smaller than you are. And that's not cool. That isn't cool for me. That isn't cool for anyone that's watching this, because you are meant to do more. You've just got to find the kind of frequency that works for you. This is something I learned very early on when I was working in that job. And that pushed me to quitting. This next section is the quit. So something snapped. Not dramatically, just a slow build of, I can't really do this anymore. I realized three things specifically at that time when I was quitting my job. One, as a coder in the system, I was too far away from the money. There's no sense of perspective when you're just a cog in the system. You don't know how much value your code is bringing in, and that's what makes you replaceable. You have no leverage. You are somebody that can be replaced by another coder. You're also somebody that can be replaced by an AI. And that's kind of what we were doing. At that time, GPT and Claude had just come out. They were good enough to replace models that helped you visualize data. And it started getting to me. The second thing I realized is when you don't have that sort of leverage and it makes you replaceable, you are constantly wasting your own time being in a role like that and actually choosing to be in a role like that. Like, the fear of uncertainty and the love for stability just keeps you in that loop. And the third and probably the most crucial thing I understood at that time was you have no control. You have no control whatsoever. Tomorrow, say the industry collapses and all these companies go bankrupt, you have nothing to fall back on. Absolutely nothing. No hard skills. Say your technical skills are replaced by an AI, you have nothing to fall back on. At that point, I was left with two options: continue sticking to it, basically hog all the glory of being part of a role like that, or quit the job. And I had no savings. I had zero savings. I had no client lined up, no business plan, just a gut feeling that if I had stayed for a while more, I would lose the version of myself that was hungry enough to try, and basically passionate enough to take on something that he truly loved and see it through. I moved back home. I mean, I'm telling you this in hindsight. At that time, I was terrified. I went back home. I went home after a very, very long time. I think about 4 or 5 years. And the overall vibe for me at that time mentally wasn't that great. I felt like everything that I had worked so hard for had come to a standstill, and I had no clue what to do. I think that's when I spoke to dad about it. I spoke to my friends about it. I spoke to my parents about it, extended family, and everybody else. And they told me what they were doing at 23 and where they are now. Not just across how much money they've made, but across what they were actually doing at 23, how they were feeling at 23, and where they were 20 years later. I also met Moksh and Manan. These are two lads that I've known since I was 4 years old, 5 years old, grown up together. And yeah, we've basically seen each other through various phases of life. Weirdly, each of us went our separate ways after school. Moksh picked up industrial design and product design as a career. Manan took on cinematography and film, and I took on engineering along with all of the things that I learned while I was building my bands. So yeah, at that time, I think the biggest feeling I felt was walking out of a building knowing that I just gave up on the only thing that paid my bills, and all I could do was pretend that I was fine. Underneath, there was a strange relief, yes, but I was relatively scared. I was relatively scared. And I didn't quit when I didn't I didn't quit when I had the answer. I basically quit when my current path stopped being the question worth asking. I think at that point I realized one other thing, that if I was sitting there building somebody else's dream over and over again on a day-to-day basis, if I took all of that energy and then put it into myself, I would have created something everyone's very, very familiar with, but no one really truly understands: momentum. I would have created momentum for myself, and that could have changed a lot of things for me. That was the mindset and mentality I had before moving into the next phase of my life, which was actually ideating a project with my friends. This is section 3, the false start. All I knew at that point, after doing everything that I had to do, was that I wanted to start something of my own. I was in the house that I grew up in my room, and Moksh and Manan were with me over there. And all I asked them was, boys, if you wanted to start a project together. We had no clue what we were going to do, and we had no idea on what we were going to and how we were going to do it. At that time, I also fairly remember that I had fallen deeply in love with sneakers, especially dad shoes and the New Balance. A lot of New Balances, especially the 9060. And I started studying how to make a sneaker. That was the first idea I pitched the boys. I asked them if they would be down to make sneakers. It felt like the perfect combination of our skill sets. It felt like I could bring in the marketing and the general side of things to the table, while Moksh built the product side and Manan built the film side. It felt fantastic, like the three of us complemented each other's skill sets perfectly and strongly enough to be able to develop a sneaker. I was obsessed with the craft, and Moksh was obsessed with the complexity of designing a shoe, the engineering, and the culture around it. But we did a 6-week cohort with Build Space. We finished season 5 at that time, and Nevermind was the project that we were working on. Through the duration of that project, we did an in-depth research into the industry and everything else, and started realizing how expensive sneakers were to produce. We didn't have many manufacturing connections. We spoke to a few people online. We didn't have any capital. The complexity excited us for sure, but it made it super impossible for us to take it on immediately because of one main reason. None of us wanted to take any money from our parents. Neither did we want to take a bank loan. Neither did we want to invest and get an investor on board because, quite frankly, collectively, we also lacked the kind of experience we needed to build a global brand, and we didn't want to waste money doing it. There was a fourth founder. She left. She was head of fashion and materials for the brand. And in August 2024, the project collapsed even before it launched. Um, Weeks in, weeks out, and we were kind of already done. We just had a sneaker prototype that we had designed in Blender that someday we thought we'd make. But the project, Nevermind as a whole, had come to a standstill. The biggest lesson I learned at that time was that passion for a product doesn't mean you're ready to build that product. Timing, resources, and everything else matter as much as the idea. Falling in love with building is essential for sure, but you also need to fall in love with what you have right now and what's possible, so that you can make the best use of everything you have going on for you. Create like a arsenal around it and go from that. Because your arsenal is your biggest advantage. It's your armory. You can choose with anything in your arsenal. And that's kind of what you build anything with. Once Nevermind came to a standstill, a bunch of things changed for me. I had to go back into survival mode. I had no clue what I was going to do because the entire project came to a standstill. All the ideas I had around the brand itself were all in theory. There was not much going on a physical level. And for a sneaker company, the only way you make money is by selling sneakers. So I didn't have anything. I had no money at that time. I just moved back to Dubai and I was in desperate need for funds because this is an expensive city to live in. That was my reality check. This is section 4, the survival drum. Bills exist, and my reality was that I had $0 to my name at that time. I did the simplest, easiest thing I could do: ask for help. I called my friend up and asked him if I could join his marketing agency. On paper, it felt like I was going backwards. I'd quit a tech job in one of the biggest companies in the region to start something of my own, and now I'm working for someone else again. But this is probably where I learned things that I couldn't have learned anywhere else. And till date, I credit my friend for teaching me these things and exposing me to these things. The few big things I learned at the stage was how to manage clients, how to scope projects, how an actual service business runs, the operational backbone that I had zero understanding of. I knew the tech world, I knew the creative space. Service as a concept and service as an industry did not exist for me in my head. And this is 2024. This is 2024. I didn't know how a service business ran. I didn't know how a consultancy business ran. The whole time, Nevermind was at the back of my mind. It wasn't dead, but it was waiting. It was dormant. There was not much going on. And I kind of felt a little embarrassed going back to a position like this and, working for a job that I wasn't truly passionate about. But the takeaways from a role like this were incredible. The role mostly had to do with influencer marketing and learning how the art of influencer marketing works. It meant that I had to swallow my pride, knowing that this isn't the end. It's just a detour that was going to teach me enough to actually take Nevermind off the ground. There was a slight shame at first, but you swallow that pill, you accept, and then that's when you just create space or the space to grow. Yeah, my biggest lesson at that time was that the job I took to survive might teach me and did teach me more to actually kind of build the dream I have. Every environment teaches you enough if you pay enough attention. I learned more about running a business in that agency than I would have learned trying to figure it out alone with zero experience. Also, because that agency gave me access to the kind of clients that it did. immediately within maybe 2 weeks of 2 to 3 weeks of working in that agency. I was working with global clients and talking to those people, understanding how the mindset works behind it, um, understanding how different industries worked. That became that became part of my arsenal. It became part of something I could do and something I could understand. And with more experience working across multiple industries, I started picking on more skills. And that's what's kind of translated into Nevermind even now. But the project was dead. The project was dormant. There was not much going on at Nevermind. I wouldn't let this one die, no matter what. All my other projects in the past have kind of come to a standstill and just stopped. My bands, my engineering projects. But this was one project I wasn't willing to let die. I remember discussing a pivot with the team. And this is what brings us to section 5, which is the pitch. Nevermind had to stay alive no matter what. The sneaker idea died, but the name, the energy, the branding, the belief that we could actually build something, everything was still there. So I went back to Moksh and Manan with a different pitch. And I said, boys, what if we were to start a creative studio? What if we were to offer our skill sets as a service in exchange for money? And collectively, the room kind of felt dead. We were nervous, but we were optimistic about the brand. And everyone said, nah, that was essentially the overall vibe. It wasn't a no, it wasn't a yes, it was just, you know? We were 3 guys on a call with no clients, no portfolio, no website, but just, yeah, maybe, let's see. It sounded stupid, and it still sounds stupid when you say it out loud, but you just got to take that leap of faith sometimes. And eventually, one day you'll have enough experience, enough clients, enough everything going on for you to a point where it just becomes part of your arsenal. You've got to figure out that frequency on your own. But yeah, I think proof of concept is very important. And when you have one proof of concept, it just builds confidence in you and yourself to actually do more of it. Which is what brings us to section 6, our first client. I learned somewhere that the easiest way to get your first clients is ask your friends and family. Everyone has ideas, everyone wants to do something. Everyone wants to live a less mediocre life. Everyone wants to become someone. And everyone, at the end of the day, as long as you're human, you want to become something that your immediate circle is not. You want to be exceptional. You want to be beyond that. So my first client was a friend of mine. He is a pickleball player, and he's always had this dream of starting a pickleball company. He wanted to have his own patterns, the ones that they used to pickle, and a pattern. He just came to me and he was like, "Hey man, I have this idea. Can you please design us a logo?" Now you see, none of us were brand designers. We had design skills from different contexts. Moksh drew cars. I had drawn t-shirt designs. I had made my own t-shirts, made my own artworks for music. And from a university standpoint, Moksh had industrial design and product design experience. Dude's done a bunch of cars, trains, and other automotive stuff. Me, it was mostly designing systems in AI, designing and basically building, the kind of robotic experiments that we had in university around my research field. But no one had specifically done brand design. We figured it out. The project was called Coat Expert, and the brand turned out great. As an initial brand, we used everything that we had going on for us from a skill set point of view, and we just built on top of that. Plus, we had tools like ChatGPT and Claude to really, really support, you know, that learning experience and act like a catalyst to get somewhere. Once Code Expert was done, word spread fast. Arthur bought his dad, a petrochemical company, an oil and gas company that required a new pamphlet. And we told him that what if we didn't design a pamphlet for you, instead we designed a website. And you could promote this website at one of the conferences they wanted the pamphlet for. We built out the website, and that's when we realized one more thing, that hey, we don't just do brand design, we also do web design. Then a fashion brand came asking for a mascot. It took a while, but we developed and built that mascot for this brand, and the brand's owner was an actor from Bollywood. Massive curveball, but we finished it, and we did it really, really well. And that's when we added another skill set to our arsenal: mascot design, any sort of custom design. But as time went, these projects kept on stacking, and we didn't know any of these industries. We had no case studies. We had nothing except the ability to learn fast and care deeply about the output. That's all. As a team, these are our two non-negotiables. Whatever we take on at 100%. If we can't take it on 100%, we don't do it. And if we took something on, collectively as a team, we hate leaving it in unfinished or incomplete. It has to be done. That's kind of when I started seeing a pattern, and I started seeing momentum for the first time. The pattern essentially was we take on projects of ridiculous nature, something that we've never really been exposed to, and we figured it out, and that was added to our case study, and that's what we present to the next client, and then they were so impressed that they would sign in immediately with us. And price wasn't much of contender anymore. They were willing to pay for the output and willing to pay for the fact that the founders themselves are actually building this brand with us. Each new client felt like proof, and we weren't experts, but we could become experts fast enough to deliver. The kind of work that we were delivering was on the global standard, and that's what helped us grow our confidence. I was delusional about it, but as projects kept stacking and as the money kept coming in, my co-founders built a lot more confidence in this direction, and they started doing a lot more for the brand. It was still fragile at that stage, but every project felt like it could be the one that exposed us on a global level. My biggest lesson again at this point was that you didn't need to know a specific industry to serve it well. What we needed was the ability to learn fast, ask the right questions, care very, very deeply about the output, than stay in the comfort zone. Expertise is rented. Taste and work ethic are owned forever. You have to become a moat of your own taste and build a work ethic around it. And I promise you, no matter how fast the world gets and how many AI tools are out there, you will be wanted everywhere, and you will also become somebody that doesn't lose your value in any room that you step in. 100%. Entering section 7, this is the identity crisis. Things were going well. The clients kept coming in, revenue was growing, momentum was being built, and then someone asked me a relatively simple question: what is Nevermind? I froze. I didn't have an answer. In my head, we were a sneakers company making a creative studio, which felt weird to say, because what sneakers company makes a creative studio? We weren't an agency. We didn't want to be. We weren't doing only one thing and doing it over and over again. We had the ability to make films, design products, build AI tools, make music. But here we are making logos, color palettes, websites, maybe shooting a few ad films here and there. And that question haunted me, man. That question really, really haunted me. I couldn't sleep because if I can't explain what we are, how can anyone else? How can anyone else? So I was like literally in a crisis. As one of the founders of a company, we had no clue what we were building. Until one of my friends was like, yo, what if we reverse the roles? What if we're a creative studio that makes sneakers? I was like, huh, interesting. Stuck in my head for a couple of days. It started to make sense. And then a couple other things started clicking in my head. What if we're a creative studio that made cars? What if we're a creative studio that made music? What if we're a creative studio that made movies? What if we're a creative studio that designed merch? What if we're a creative studio that had its own founders community? I mean, what if we're a creative studio that served clients but also did their own thing? Yeah. There was a bigger picture being formed at this time. I didn't know what I was building before this. I had to walk and, flow through imposter syndrome. Mostly got to do with identity, not ability. And my biggest lesson was, as long as momentum is, on, you will figure it out. You're bound to figure it out as long as you keep moving. And that's kind of where our tagline came from. The full sentence for Nevermind is, Nevermind, as long as you keep moving, you're going to be just fine. That's why our company is called Nevermind and our tagline is called Moving On. Because it applies to everybody. It applies to everyone doing anything in their lives. Nevermind, as long as you keep moving, you'll be just fine. Yeah. There was also this thing that I learned in Bellspace, that if you can't really explain what you're working on in one sentence to a 5-year-old, you are doing it wrong. You're building it wrong. And that's what we figured out. Big, big, big milestone for me and the team, because now we could explain what we were doing. Now we knew who to study and what our competitors were, or who our competitors were, and how to position ourselves to, kind of bring in more people, bring in more clients. Yeah. We kind of had to stop and figure it out before we scaled it. And before we scaled something that we couldn't define. So that clarity moment was great. For 2 months, we didn't take on any projects. At this point, we move on to the next section, which is section 8, study. I became obsessed with studying brands. Not just our niche, all brands, all industries, all regions. I studied every move, every marketing campaign, every strategy, every system. How Nike builds demand through culture, how Apple bridges products and trust, and how the best brands in the world make every single touch point feel intentional. And that's when it clicked. Branding is the foundation of everything. Marketing, film, storytelling, music, product. There is a core guideline underneath all of that, which dictates whether something is working in favor for the brand or doesn't. And that was a massive, massive click in my head, because the question is always simple. When somebody designs something for a brand, you hear this in every room. Is this on brand or is this not? That's it. There's a simple, very straightforward question that asks if something is on brand or if something is not. Which is the biggest question, which kind of chooses and guides an entire brand success or failure. If a marketing campaign has succeeded, someone at some point has asked this question. If a massive inflow has come in via a sales tactic. Someone at some point has asked this question. We were lost, but I think studying and gaining the kind of knowledge that we gained in those 2-3 months across brands and agencies and how they operate pulled us out of it. The answer to what we were came from studying everybody else and actually implementing that study every client that we took on. Not from really staring at ourselves and at an empty wall and saying, oh, you know what, maybe with this, maybe with this, maybe with this, maybe we should become this or this and this and this. There was a big research phase that went into, identifying what Nevermind could become in the long run and where we were. Yeah. Section 9, the answer. Nevermind is a multidisciplinary creative studio. We're built by people that can build anything, but we choose branding as the foundation because without a clear core, everything else is noise. We have 6 verticals. We have the client side, Nevermind OS. We have our own products, Nevermind. We're going to be designing products for other clients. We have film, music, and community. Each one of these feed into the others. Nothing exists independently. Over 6-7 months ago, we registered the company, and we've been operational for about a year and a half. And this span, we've had 24 brands, well, actually 30 brands, 14 industries, and about 8 or 9 countries. Revenue is built entirely through inflow. We've never sent a single cold DM till date. I've hated the idea of doing that. You lose all leverage by dropping and sending a cold DM. No cold pitching, no outbound, just the work speaking for itself. And the kind of work that we've put out so far acts like the backbone for us to, get more clients. Every single sale becomes a little easier every time we put out exceptional work. Because all I've got to do is share my screen and nudge the client or nudge somebody in the right direction with kind of clarity and, while showing them their ideal position of where they want to be with their brand. And they see somebody across their own industry with the kind of branding and work that we've done for them. That's it. They've been convinced. Yeah. It's been an incredible journey. Biggest realization was that your positioning isn't something you invent. It's something you discover by doing or working long enough to see a pattern within it. We didn't really choose to be a multidisciplinary studio. We realized we were one. 10 projects in, approximately. The naming just gave it a structure. I feel like the one line of the brand was discovered and designed after the 11th project. Yeah. It was a random day, but yeah. And as we go, we are currently working with really cool clients, man, across so many industries that we're so stoked to showcase and talk about over the next few months. Finally, we come to the end of this video, which is section 10, the close. This isn't a success story. It's we've barely crossed a year. But for me, the goal is to build this into a $50 or $100 million company by, say, 2030. Not by doing everything. We don't really want to freaking make a real estate company out of this, or, do random things. We just want to do the right things properly and let the system compound. Whether we hit that number, whether we don't hit that number is secondary. But for me and the team, sticking to this and actually building something out of this means a lot. My 2026 focus is to get fitter, get calmer, grow the company, fall in love with the process, which I already am, and do more of everything that matters. Because what else is life, you know? And we're just getting started. This is one of the finest journeys that I've kind of taken on in life, and we're still building it. It's still incomplete. I don't know if we'll ever complete it, but we're still building it. This has been a pleasure so far to work with the kind of people we've worked with, and the kind of people I'm working with. It's an incredible experience looking at, you know, friends and taking them from friends to colleagues and building something truly cool with these guys. Yeah, that's it. I hope you guys have stuck along till the end, and if you have, this is my account. Now on YouTube, apparently. And you know the drill. Like, share, subscribe. Peace. Fun fact, when Nevermind first started, I was on this couch. Exactly here, talking about sneakers. I will probably drop a snippet of that at the end of this. So, yeah. Peace. Cheers. Thanks for listening.